Okay, people. What is it? I think it's June 1st, 2017. Here's something to think about. If you notice, for the last 2 years and a bit, right, I pretty much make reference to Uncle John almost every day. That's because I talk to him every day, people. Right? I was talking to him, whether I was thinking about him or whether I'd, say something out loud. Right? Every day. And, I'm wondering if he ever thinks about us. To the point where he realizes what he's thinking about. Because basically, those people, they gave him shock therapy and they removed large parts of his memory so that he wouldn't talk about us, people. Because they didn't want to deal with the reality that he had an immediate family before they medically kidnapped him. Right? You don't live with somebody for 23 years and nurture the children as they're being born and raise them and be a part of that process to simply disappear. Well, the corporations that enabled that disappearance tippy-toe around the subject using the court system to their benefit to avoid taking responsibility for the harm that they've caused to 8 people on this planet for corporate profit. The old folks' home's getting paid, which means the provincial government is getting paid. It got what it wanted, because as soon as he signed into that forced you choose a plan in 2002, he was targeted for his money at a certain age. And once he hit that certain age, because they're not putting money into the healthcare system, it's easy for these crooks to be wandering the halls, picking and choosing who they want for these care homes as you pay as you go service under a pay-as-you-go service. And of course, they don't want them squawking. They don't want these old people squawking about their circumstances and being locked up into little mini prisons, being forced out of their homes, being forced to sell their homes, being forced to lose their loved ones, whether it's a wife, whether it's a husband, whether it's grandchildren, whether it's caretakers and stepdaughters such as myself, unlike an adopted daughter that just wields around a piece of paper, because I'm coming to this, okay? This is where it's going to. Now, think of it like this, people. The only reason John adopted his adopted daughter, was because they couldn't have children. Him and his wife. In part because Joan was already an anorexic and a bulimic when he married her. Joan came into the marriage with psychological problems. But of course John wasn't aware of that, right? So over a course of time they couldn't have kids, because when your body doesn't get enough nutrients, it doesn't produce babies as a woman. That's just a fact. Right? So if you're going to starve your body of food, don't expect to get pregnant. Never mind maintain that pregnancy to full term. Right? So because they were Catholic, they adopted a baby through a Catholic organization, church. Right? Keep in mind, this was in the 1960s. Late 60s. Late 60s. So a lot of single moms were forced to give up their babies. They were forced to give up their babies. Right? If people think it was bad today, in terms of, these child protective services going in and destroying whole families for profit, to prop up the state budget, like what's going on in the United States, en masse, right? Targeting large families, right? Because there's more profit with the larger family. If there's 7 kids and you're getting $80,000 per kid through the system, you're talking big bucks, people. Well, the population back in the 60s wasn't like that. So it was mainly single mothers that were being targeted. So John's adopted daughter was probably the result of a single mother fornicating out of marriage. And because you know, the religious doctrine was to remove those children from those parents by any means necessary to, infuse institutional racism and build in a profit margin from that ideology, right? It became a booming business, right? Thousands of children were taken from their families, mothers, right? Fathers, and put into adoption to prop up the Catholic Church. Hold on. So anyway, because John was Catholic, right? They gave them a baby when they needed one. So Debbie went to Catholic school, and she went to private school when she turned, of age. Up until age 12 or something like that, when, I don't know, maybe younger, I don't know. She was in there for a while anyway, just because it was the Catholic thing to do, right? But John used to tell me that because, he wasn't rich, right? Debbie was kind of like the outcast within the private school there, right? Because her, economical stature in life wasn't as high as the other kids in that school. But outside of that, she went to a private school and whatnot, and that was the epitome of what was right? So, where was I? I should have wrote this down. So, for such morally religious people, I don't want to say this, people, but I'm almost feeling like the Catholic doctrine is evil. It's evil. It's evil in the fact that it superimposes itself onto individuals as the only way, right? And because it was built on institutional racism that formally began with white people in Canada. I'm not talking about other countries, okay? I'm talking about Canada. The migration of white people coming into Canada, overtaking the natives and da-da-da-da, right? And along came the Catholic Church to hammer in that nail, right? With their nuns and their residential schools and, just the whole 9 yards. Well, that's evil. That's evil because it's a form of genocide, right? When they came over and they started to, decimate the natives and that type of thing, it's a form of genocide. And so, why you'd want to deem yourself to be a part of that in terms of, that's my religion. I'm a Catholic and I'm proud of it because that's the only way to go in this world. Other religions do it too, but other religions don't have the stronghold in our society like the Catholics in terms of history do in Canada, right? And you can even say it crossed over into the United States, maybe started in the United States, I don't know, I'm not a history expert. All I know is that John came from a Catholic background, played by Catholic rules, right? While his extended family, the ones that took him, right, wheel around that they're Catholics, right? I'm sure as they're wandering through the halls, as they're on the job, I'm a Catholic, I'm proud to be Catholic, it's not about John is my brother, it's more like I'm Catholic and I'm superior and my doctrine is what's going to dictate the outcome of Uncle John. What dictated the outcome of Uncle John to the point where, does he ever think about his people? He wasn't allowed to talk about us. He was punished for talking about us. Whereas I talk about him every day. Okay? So why such a divide? Right? In terms of, he simply just didn't disappear and not want to talk to anybody in this household. Okay? That right there should be enough suspicion for people to want to investigate what happened to him. In terms of the healthcare system, because if they're going to let Uncle John slip through the cracks like this, right? Because he's safe within the Catholic domain, right? And I've said this before, it's Catholic, don't touch it, it's protected by what? Jesus Christ? Or more like Lucifer? Because when you look at the actions of what happened to Uncle John, it's leaning more towards Lucifer. And when you look at the past and you realize where Debbie actually came from, in terms of to fill that void with some Catholic couple that couldn't have kids, and then the Catholic Church said, well, that's interesting. We'll fill that gap. We'll just go over there, snag a unwanted child, go to the federal government, right? Ask for a bit of money so that we can do the paperwork on that child. And then, give the child to the couple, right? Well, the couple tries to stay with the format and keep the child in a private school, right? Till such time the child's not in the private. She was there like 4 or 5 years or something like that. And then if you look at what she writes and how she writes, you think she was still in grade 1 in that private school. So for all that money that John and Joan spent to put Debbie in the first 5 years of her life into a private school, didn't teach her very much. But I'm starting to think, people, that they wanted Debbie to be dumb. Debbie was just a pawn. Debbie was just a pawn to the end goal of what happened to Uncle John. Right? Because they tried to say, oh, well, the adopted daughter. The adopted daughter never spent no time with John. Right? Absolutely none. She had plenty of time to help John before I even showed up on the freaking doorstep. Okay? And she had plenty of time to step up and help John after I showed up at the doorstep. But Debbie already had a grudge because she wasn't a rich Catholic, because she was raised Catholic, right? So because her parents couldn't provide to her the things that she wanted in terms of staying in a Catholic school, even though she wasn't learning anything, right? Or the horseback riding that they decided that they couldn't afford anymore because it just got to be too expensive. And so they said no more horseback riding, and she rebelled. She said, fuck you, to John, basically. But then Joan had her own problems because Joan liked to pit one against the other. So I'm sure Joan was pitting Debbie against John. I don't think it was all Debbie's fault. But it didn't help when Debbie just decided not to talk to him. But then all of a sudden, 34 years later, Debbie shows up out of the blue in name, not even in body, because she doesn't have to, because she's just that piece of paper that was transported at the time of her adoption. Okay? Because when you look at the sister, who's well educated, Uncle John's sister, who's well educated, been in the Catholic Church ever since, right? Believes in the Catholic doctrine, right? Has no remorse to hurt people, whether it's her own brother or whether it's the people that she provides services to. Because if she did this to her brother, you know she's done this to other people. And that's why she did it to her brother, because she's already done it before. Whereas Debbie just kind of was a pawn. She was just a pawn, people. Just that one little leverage, so that when it can't go in front of a judge because the adopted daughter said. What? They're not allowed. John's not allowed to talk to the kids, right? John's not allowed to talk to Judy. That's all in the past. We're going to put that in the past, John, so don't bring it up. Could you imagine him sitting there in a wheelchair, not being able to get up, asking to talk to us, and they're saying, no, you can't because you're not well, you're too depressed, you're too sick, you're too this, you're too, no, not until you're better. We don't want to talk about that. You're just upsetting, look, you're upsetting me. I don't want to talk about them. Let's just focus on now. And hearing that time after time after time after time, as they're drugging him at their convenience, right? In other words, they're the ones that give him the drugs. So they can give him any amount that they wanted at any time to control his actions, which one was to keep him in the freaking wheelchair so he couldn't get up. Right? Give him a little more and he'll get drowsy and fall asleep and he'll be quiet for a while. Right? Well, they're all running around being Catholic. Looking for the next victim, people. Looking for the next victim. This is not what I wanted. I'm saying what I wanted to say, but I'm not saying it in a very concise manner, right? Because how can, like, I talk about him all the time, and I'm not going to stop talking about him. I'm not going to give him his not just due. In other words, I'm going to give him his just due. Okay? I'm not going to get up on camera and say Uncle John was a scoundrel, because he wasn't. The people that are the scoundrels are the ones that took him, are the ones that prevented him to think about us by not allowing him to talk to us, by not allowing him to talk about us. But yet, they run around within their institutions, more than one, perpetrating morality, right? But they can't follow through on their accusations that skirted what they did to not only Uncle John, but to us. So I'm 55 years old now. Am I going to be talking about this in the next 5 years? 5 years more of 1,000 videos with reference to Uncle John, wondering if he's thinking about us? I did a search online to see if they put his obituary up there because maybe he's died by now. But you know what? These guys are such scoundrels that they would probably not do an obituary. They would find a way to lose his obituary just so that they could hide the fact that he died. And they will hope that their dirty secret will disappear. Right? Well, I'm still sitting here talking about Uncle John, wondering if he thinks about us in the recesses of the depths of what he's got left, okay, what he's got left of his brain. Now let's just imagine him sitting in this care home, okay? I'm in the morning, right? I'm like, gee, John, are you happy? Are you happy, John? I'm like asking him today, are you happy? What if you would have been home, where would we be right now if you were home? I can tell you right now, I probably would not be living in this house. I probably would have had to move. Because we were already talking about it, people. We were already making plans, right, in terms of alternatives as to his needs as he was changing, right? And because I had the kids, we weren't worried about me having to look after him by myself all day, every day, because we had the kids, right? And he was happy and comfortable with that. Instead, what they did is they shuffled him through like an assembly line, like some piece of meat, through a bunch of fucking stranger hands to do whatever they wanted to do just so they could isolate him to where he is right now, and is he happy? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm sure in a physical sense, in a physical sense. This is the point of this video, okay? He gets up in the morning. You know, I doubt he's walking, right? Not much, I can tell you that right now. Because they've got him trained, right? That would be the first thing. And he needs things to hang on to, right? Whatever. And usually in care homes, they have just big open halls and that type of thing, right? Maybe he's walking with a walker, but not very much. And if he is, he's only going from point A to point B. In other words, from his room to the TV, into the common area where they have the TV. And then he sits himself down, okay? So let's say this morning he got up, right? He managed to get dressed, right? Whether with or without help, you know. And then he got on his walker and he walked his 20 feet to the common area, right? And he sat down and he's with all these old people, with his crow caregivers, right? Because they're crows, people. They're worse than crows, more like vultures, right? With his vulture caregivers that, you know, come down and, oh, how you doing today, John? Are you happy? We've got yogurt for this morning and a bran muffin. Are you happy, John? And he'll be, yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, I love you. I love you because he said I love you so many times to the kids and me that it's in his vocabulary to say I love you. So he's telling some vulture caregiver that he loves her because she's giving him some yogurt and a bran muffin, right? Because that's quality care, people, right? But as soon as he mentions Judy and the rest of the kids, they take away the yogurt and they take away the bran muffin until he learns not to talk about us. So is he really happy? In a physical sense, I could say yes, he's happy. Because he's sitting there getting yogurt and a muffin. I'm just giving you an analogy here, right? And he's eating. He's got his little old folks woman there, you know, to keep him company, right? His little friend, right? That they talk about the weather, you know, nothing important. You know, how he misses Joan, right? And how his adopted daughter came and seen him 4 months ago, right? Or last week, right? Just to see if he's alive because she's waiting for the money, right? Thank God he has no life insurance policy. Although I'm sure Joan left something. So there's still money waiting. They're just drooling. These are the Catholic people just drooling for this fucking money. This is where Debbie comes in. Because Debbie was that pawn. That's all she was. She was conceived for money. Debbie was conceived for money. The minute the Catholic Church took that child away from the mother, so they could prop up their institutional machine, right? To look after the congregation, which John was part of, which his extended family is part of. It's like a little cult, right? So he's sitting there eating his yogurt, eating his muffin. Does he ever take a moment to be sneaky? To just sit back and think about Marcaine? To sit back and think about Shimei, the baby that he held the moment she was born? Does he ever get to sit back and think about Tisha, Brooks, Sierra, or Andre? Or his time with his wife when she lived with us here in this house in a bit, right, for 4 years, and then going back and forth to visit her, and then finally she died, and he was there when she died? Does he ever stop and think about those things? Or is that all just gone? Because if he thinks about those things, he can't tell his little friend that's sitting next to him, oh yeah, Tisha and Shimei used to come with me when Joan was dying, or when Joan was at that care ward, right, at that old folks home, and you know, the girls were always there for me. The kids were always there for me. The kids were always there for me. The kids were always there for me. Judy was always there for me. The kids were always there for me. Can he say that to his friend as he's eating that muffin and that yogurt? Is he happy, people? If he's not allowed to talk about those things, what? Uncle John took his own ass to go visit Joan. Uncle John looked after Auntie Joan for 4 years by himself. How can these Catholic people seriously convince themselves that he's happy when he can't talk about those things? He could never talk about being with Joan in the last 5 years of her life. Because if he talks about Joan, he talks about us. And he wasn't allowed to talk about us. Because that was the past. I have it on video where they're telling him that was the past. Do not talk about us. But yet, he's happy. And that's why I don't get mad at him, people. Right? Because this is the most cruelest form of, I don't know. It's all built on money. I wanted to say humanity because they did it for money, people. Honest to God, if he had no money, they wouldn't have cared. They didn't care about him when his income was $15,000 a year. They didn't care. They didn't care what he did when he was going bankrupt. He didn't care what he did when his wife was doing the things that she was doing and his daughter was doing what she was doing, and he was stuck in that little apartment and couldn't go anywhere. They didn't care. So anyway, Debbie was a pawn. Simply a political pawn. She was born to prop up the Catholic Church and its congregation that have rooted themselves into our public institutions and brought their corruption with them in the year 2017. Because it's still happening, people. Until this gets settled in court and gets busted wide open, it will continue to happen to vulnerable people out there, regardless of their religions. Because it's a cycle. First it will be the baby boomers, right? And that's why it's here. That's why they use the immigration population to do their dirty work for them at low wages. And get everybody fighting for to buy a house now before it gets really out of control, as they're making it by bringing in the rich bastards to overinflate the properties. It goes back to that AAA credit rating and how we got there and what's going to keep it up there, right? But on a personal level, for Uncle John, is he happy? How can you be happy sitting there eating your yogurt and your muffin, not being allowed to talk about your wife in the last 5 years of her life, because the minute you open your mouth about Auntie Joan, you're going to get Shimei, Tisha, Brooke, Sierra, Marcaine, Judy, Andre, and all the other little kids that were hanging around Mama Lynn. Right? Because there was all kinds of kids around Uncle John. I don't think he's happy, people. I think he's a shell of a man. I mean, I've said that before. They put on a little pretty necklace, right? Comb his hair back, right? Trim his little mustache. They wheel him out. They do their little picture, right? But at the end of the day, what's on the inside? Right? Is he crying? Does he ever think about us? We know he's not allowed to talk about us. How can you call that quality health care when he's not allowed to talk about 30 years of his life? Just so they could protect their dirty secret. Because it's all about money. Just like those babies that they take from these people, these women or whatever, and they give them to somebody else that's so much what? Pays $10, 10% to the Catholic Church? That wants to profess itself to be morale? Epitome of what is right? But yeah, The only reason Debbie was adopted was to guarantee that the superannuation life insurance policy would be transferred over. Only John didn't have a superannuation life insurance policy. He had us. That's who he had, people. He had us. Us in this house. That's who he had. That was his superannuation life insurance policy.